Hello and welcome back to The Independent Pianist. I'm your host, Cole Anderson, and today we're just continuing my series on Earl Wild's Gershwin Etudes. And this is, of course, one of the most famous of all Gershwin tunes, I Got Rhythm. One little note on the text. You'll notice that I have not put the wonderful text by Ira Gershwin, into the music. In some of my previous videos I did that, but I just found that there was too much going on and it's kind of complicated to even put the text in here. So I'm going to save that for when I do the George Gershwin songbook. There's a collection of songs that George Gershwin himself transcribed for piano solo, and eventually I'm going to put that on the channel as well, and I'll put all the text in that upload. But for this one, I had so much to talk about when it comes to just the musical and technical things that Earl Wild is doing in his arrangement of this music that I didn't think it was necessarily worth it. I am, however, not trying to minimize the importance of Ira Gershwin. If you don't know anything about the Gershwin brothers, they had a very close working relationship, and the final state of most of these songs has as much to do with Ira as with George. They had a very idiosyncratic working method. Usually when a composer sets text, the text comes first, and then they set that to music. But it was very different. It was much more organic with the Gershwin brothers. Usually, apparently, George would come up with some kind of melodic idea first, and then Ira would fit words to that, and they would kind of go back and forth building the song, maybe changing the music, changing the words until they had something that they were both happy with. And George would oftentimes take Ira's advice on musical matters as well in his compositional process. So when you see that it's written by George and Ira Gershwin, that's no joke. They really both had a lot to do in the full process. But for now, as long as you remember that it's I got rhythm, none of this I've got rhythm nonsense. It's I got rhythm. You're going to be okay. Of all of Earl Wild's arrangements, this is probably the most humorous one, the most fun to play, and maybe also the most difficult, although Fascinating Rhythm definitely gives it a run for its money. There is something a little bit ironic, pleasantly ironic about Earl Wild's turn of mind in his arrangement here. I mean, it's called I Got Rhythm. However, he intentionally obscures the rhythm in certain parts in a way which is very funny. So when you have the main theme, the way he sets the main theme in the first chorus, the original Gershwin tune does have a syncopation, and of course, Wild keeps that. However, he also sets the melody off of the strong beats. So you can see we have this alternating pattern, left hand, right hand going on, and always the melody is off of the strong beats. It's always on the and. So the first melody note is on the end of 2, then the end of 4, and so forth. And that gives this opening a kind of charmingly off-kilter feeling to it. And he starts out from the very beginning trying to confuse our rhythmic sense just a little bit. You'll notice that he has this 5-note hemiol pattern in the opening. So we're in 2/4, so there should be 2 groups of 4 in each bar, 2 groups of 4 16th notes in each bar. But instead he has groups of 5. But you also will notice that he puts accents on the beat, so that's also fighting against this hemiol pattern. And actually, you don't hear people bring out these accents very much in recordings, including Earl Wild's own recording. So I tried to bring them out as much as I could. It's actually quite difficult in this recording, just to kind of see what that would be like. And before you wonder about this horrendous key of G-flat major, this is a thing that oftentimes amateur pianists complain about. Why is so much great piano music written in impossible-to-read keys, like G-flat major, D-flat major, and so forth? Well, that's just because the more black notes you're using, actually the easier the music becomes. The most natural physical shape for the hand on the keyboard is with the long fingers on the black keys and the short fingers, i.e. your thumb and pinky finger, on the white keys. So keys like that actually make this very easy. And also when you're leaping around trying to find bass notes really rapidly, it's much easier to leap to a black key actually than a white key. So that's exactly why Carl Tausig, in his arrangement of Schubert's Military March in D major for piano 4 hands, when he transcribed it for piano 2 hands, he transcribed it to D flat major, because he has the left hand leaping around and it's way easier to find black keys really quickly like that. So in this piece, once again, we're continuing a theme from the other etudes that we've already covered. You might remember in Lady Be Good and also in Liza, there was a lot of bitonality going on. In particular, there was this technique where Wild would replace left hand harmonies with a harmony a half step off, while keeping the right hand in the same key usually, which has a very pleasant kind of off-kilter effect to it. And here he does that again, but in a very humorous way. So you'll notice in the second chorus, it keeps sounding like the pianist is messing up in his left hand. It's like the pianist can't stay put. He keeps switching between G flat and then having the left hand suddenly play in G major for a few notes. The right hand stays exactly the same though. It just has this sound like you're suddenly messing up a little bit in the left hand, but it's actually really, really funny sounding. So I think you should always play into that, try to bring that out, because it is actually very fun. And musicians in the audience, at least, are probably going to laugh a little bit when they hear that for the first time. And this does occasionally happen where composers will write wrong notes into the music for kind of a comedic effect, but not often enough, maybe. So it's quite fun that it's here. And then again, he has this fun reharmonization technique he does toward the end of this second chorus, where he actually switches the left hand into A major, instead of G flat major, but he keeps the right hand melody notes the same. He just respells them inharmonically, so C sharp instead of D flat, D sharp instead of E flat, and so forth. But the melody notes are the same, so it's kind of like a little sidestep. It's not really a true modulation. He just sidesteps for a moment by reharmonizing the melody in this way, and then he can immediately jump back a few bars later by just switching the left hand back into the right key. It's quite a funny little method to use, and quite original, and something you don't see very often, but also quite funny sounding. So Wilde decides to have three choruses, basically three repetitions of the complete melody in this arrangement. And the last one is probably the weirdest yet. Here he has straight bitonality. The left hand stays in G flat this time, and the right hand actually switches into F major. So again, it's a half step off, a half step lowered this time. And I think there might be a little bit of an in-joke here, because the original key of I Got Rhythm is actually F major. So when you look at the vocal score, the original vocal score, and also the transcription that Gershwin did, his transcription ends in F major. So it's almost like you're dreaming of the original version here, but your left hand is kind of keeping you grounded. And then towards the end of this final chorus, there's a little callback, I think, to Liza. You can hear these little repeated note patterns, which are very similar to the coda in his transcription of Liza. And it's quite an interesting thing, actually. There's a lot of little through lines like this, harmonically and motivically, through all these pieces. They're actually quite effective played as a complete set. And I've done that before in concerts. I've actually played them all. And in the published edition, Wilde starts with Liza, and I Got Rhythm and Fascinating Rhythm make a kind of two-part ending. So it's actually kind of fun that there are these little callbacks that you get as you get towards the end of the set. And then right before the coda, we get another lovely polychord. Again, the same idea of having kind of a half-step offset, where what you'd expect to have here would be a 5 chord, so maybe a D flat 9 chord, and that's what you have basically in the right hand. You have part of that, but the left hand is offset a half step, so you get a D7 chord, and it's really, really beautiful effect. Then not much else to say about this. There's a very rapid-fire coda where you come back to the left-right hand alternating kind of technique. And again, there's kind of a bitonal thing going where the left hand is playing a pentatonic scale and then the right hand is playing on the white keys. It's a more simple one, but also quite fun sounding. And at the very end, in Earl Wilde's original version, the music just kind of fades away. It just kind of fades away into nothing. And that's probably actually a good thing to do if you're going to play Fascinating Rhythm right after this, if you're going to play the ordering that Wilde gives in the printed edition, because then this held A flat at the end kind of continues on to the next note, which is a B flat at the beginning of Fascinating Rhythm. However, if you're playing this piece by itself, I recommend doing something like Wilde's own conclusion on his recording. He plays some cluster chords here at the end, and I just expanded it a little bit. I decided to use my forearm. It sounds like he's not actually doing that many notes, so he's probably just using maybe the flat of his hand, but I think it's actually really effective to use both your forearms to play a big cluster with G flat as the bottom note and G flat as the top note. I think this is a great effect. It always gets a pleased chuckle from the crowd because it's just so unusual looking. And so once again, I mean, it's a really fun, humorous piece, and it's great to end it that way too. So yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the complete performance of Earl Wilde's Etude after George and Ira Gershwin's I Got Rhythm. It's a wonderful, humorous little piece of music. You don't get to see this kind of absolute joy and humor in music often enough. So I really enjoy working on stuff like this when I get the chance. So stay tuned till next time. I'll have some more great music, great conversation for you. I'm absolutely determined to keep the weekly schedule going from this point on. So you'll see me again next week for sure. So thank you all for staying with me, and see you next week.